Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to a brand new week of the Media Row podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Miller. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or viewing on YouTube. Make sure to click the subscribe button, comment, rate, all that good stuff, and make sure to follow us all over social media at Media Row Pod for coaches interviews, player interviews, insight into games, and just some fun clips from the show as well. Also, thank you to Kelly's Little Nipper at 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines for sponsoring these shows and being a part of the Media Row family. Get over to there, have some great food, use that keyword in Woodley, and your first drink is on the house. It has been a fun weekend of sports, hasn't it? We had basketball to talk about. We have great college football games all around with Drake. That game going down to the wire. You had Iowa, Oregon, which lived up to the hype, was an amazing game. Iowa State looking like they're getting back on track. A lot of fun stuff to get to in today's show. So let's jump right into it with Drake and St. Thomas. Drake falls at home 20-13 against St. Thomas. Bulldogs, their first loss in conference play. They fall 5-1 now in the Pioneer Football League, 6-3 overall. But listen to some of these stats. I mean, Drake was on a tear right now. First loss in over a month. They haven't lost to anyone in the Pioneer League. Their only two losses up to this point were some really good teams that were out of their league, legitimately out of their league, in South Dakota State and South Dakota. Both games on the road. Both games you're figuring out who this team is, on top of figuring out this new coaching staff, on top of losing players and having injuries that early in the season. So Drake responded well after those two losses with a win streak like this, but their 5-game winning streak comes to an end with their first loss at home since late into the season last year in 2024. The opponent, on the other hand, they've been cooking as well. St. Thomas 7-3, 5-2 in the PFL. They just won their 5th straight, and the game truly lived up to the hype. I mean, this was something we previewed on Friday's show of just, these are some of the toughest teams in that league. You have teams that are so well balanced offensively and defensively. Defensively, both teams are just so fundamentally sound on all facets. The defensive line is great. The linebackers perform really well. The secondary has improved for both of these teams. And on Friday's show, we broke down how you have the second overall defense, second overall offense, third overall offense going up against the third overall defense. They all mirror each other. And the game lived up to the hype. You had some fun with the weather conditions, saw rain, sleet, freezing rain, snow, just about everything, wind. It was pure football weather, pure fall, late, meaningful game weather in Des Moines. Everything about the game lived up to the hype, but for the Bulldogs themselves, just too many mistakes down the stretch that cost the Bulldogs their first game in the PFL League. So to really start there, we kind of broke this down into 3 sections for the Bulldogs and the Tommies, starting with penalties and miscues. We'll dive into that. Then we'll go into St. Thomas defense, what impressed me there, and then we'll finish up with some positives. And of course, you'll hear from Coach Woodley as well. But starting with the penalties and miscues, because that was the most prominent and really the biggest reason why Drake fell to St. Thomas 20-13. So you just start from the opening drive. Looking at this game, Logan Inagawa and the Drake offense get the ball first. They're marching down the field. It looks like Inagawa is leading this team to at least put up 3 points. At least. And the drive looks good. Team's looking strong. Misheld snap. Ball was snapped high. You have Luke Woodsane holding for the kicker. He grabs it. Doesn't have an option but to try to run for the first down. He comes up just short. And then St. Thomas, they get a turnover on downs. They have all this momentum now for their first drive, and they march up the field and score a touchdown. And the offense for St. Thomas just really was efficient on third downs. That was a huge reason why this Drake defense struggled as much as they did against St. Thomas. And it was really another key factor into why the Tommies were able to pull off this upset, because they went 6 of 14 on third downs. And when I'm telling you third down, it's not 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3. It's not even 3rd and manageable. These are 3rd and longs. I mean, Drake, you have J.R. Flood and Sean Allison as linebackers. There is a couple of sacks by both of those linebackers that on second down that gave Drake all this momentum. The crowd's into it. The sideline's into it. And all of a sudden, it's 3rd and 7 plus. And Peters, the quarterback who played outstanding with both his arms and legs, just was unbelievable on 3rd and long. The composure the quarterback had. And this is a quarterback that wasn't even playing Division I a year ago. He was in NAIA. And they converted, I believe, I don't have the exact number, but every single 3rd and 7 plus, they converted. They were 6 of 14 overall. Peters was unbelievable with his legs. That was another reason why, we mentioned on Friday's show, going into this game, St. Thomas has 4 of the top leading receivers in the PFL. So the secondary is going to be focused on them. The linebackers, when you have those type of weapons on the outside, they're going to be pushed back a little. But now you put in a running threat, dual threat quarterback, a mobile quarterback who was as efficient and strong as Peters was on Saturday. The linebackers are pulled all over the place. There's going to be miscommunications. There's going to be unbalanced on the field. And that's what St. Thomas did. And they just absolutely took advantage of it. So you had miscues early to start for the Bulldogs. And then you had the St. Thomas offense, even on 3rd and long, converting. And just the momentum always staying with St. Thomas. Woodley talked about in his post-game interview with me after the loss, talking about how you look at that first drive for both teams. Drake mishandles a snap, turnover on downs. St. Thomas scores a touchdown. That's a 10-point swing. And he said that really just throughout the entire game, even though he was proud of the way this team battled, they were just always playing behind the sticks. They were always playing from behind this weekend. And, they thought when Drake was able to put together a nice 3-minute drive and tie it up with a field goal right before half, that, scoreboard 0-0 in the second half. Let's see what this team can do. And it just didn't respond to the effect that I think a lot of Bulldog fans and Woodley expected them to. But also credit to St. Thomas, because that's a really good team that Drake lost to. But finally, in the penalties and miscues section, to talk about those penalties, most critical, Drake, 5 penalties for 24 yards. Now, the yards isn't outrageous, but 5 penalties is really tough, especially when we'll get to what those penalties led to for St. Thomas. But you look on the other end of the ball, St. Thomas, only 1 penalty for 10 yards. Out of their 5 penalties, 3 of them were in the fourth quarter for Drake. You had a holding and a false start that gave St. Thomas a touchdown. And then, this was the gut punch. On Friday's show, we recapped the Drake men's basketball loss, and we talked about how one play just kind of really summed up the feeling of that game, of that loss. For the Drake basketball team against Robert Morris, it was a 3 by Jashawn Thomas that rolled in and out. For this game for Drake, if I'm handpicking one play to kind of describe the feel, the theme, it's Drake gets the ball at 3 minutes to go. They're down 20-13. Just need a touchdown and you're winning this game. Or touchdown and you're tying this game. 3 minutes to go. You have 3 timeouts for Drake. you have an opportunity to do this at home. And Logan Inigawa was a really good quarterback. And was playing well. Outside of a few just rare mistakes by the quarterback, he was playing well. But you start the 3-minute drive, and before they can get the ball snapped at their own home field, they start with a false start. And right there's your 5th penalty of the day. Playing now instead of 1st and 10 at your own 25, trying to go 75 yards downfield, now you're stuck at 1st and 15. And it was just tough. They couldn't get the ball downfield, and really just the penalties and the miscues piled up too much, and Drake wasn't able to overcome them this weekend. We've talked about the resilience of this team, and I still saw a lot of that, and we'll get to that in our positive section. But overall, just too many costly mistakes that Drake just couldn't overcome. Before we move on to the St. Thomas defense section of this game, I want to share with you the opening thoughts from Coach Woodley right after the 20-13 loss to St. Thomas. So here is a clip from our interview right after the game. And if you missed any of the other interviews and clips, go check them out at Media Row Pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that good stuff. So here's Coach Woodley with his opening thoughts following the 20-13 loss to St. Thomas.
I just think we've got a special group of guys and great leadership, and I never thought for a second there was going to be any type of submission or quit or what have you, and they played. We played a full 60 minutes, and it just wasn't enough. And sometimes it's the opponent has a lot to do with that. That was a really good football team. They're on fire right now, and I believe today was their 5th win in a row, and really the 2 that they did lose in conference play could have went their way. Really down the stretch of the game. So, good football team doesn't make it feel any better, and but because you invest so much into this thing, and now you're in a position to do the things that you set out to do at the beginning of the year, and this one kind of puts your back up against the wall a little bit. And but that's sometimes that comes with this deal, and we just got to look inward, and where did we make the critical mistakes that cost us the football game. And really the first thing that jumps to my mind is just kind of how the start of the game went. We go down and have a hell of a drive. We go down and hopefully just get 3 points out of there. That's a great start to a football game. You go down and get points right away. We have an errant snap, and we turn the ball over on downs. They go down. We hold them to what we think's a field goal, and they fake it and score a touchdown. So kind of almost a 10-point swing, if you will, and those are hard to overcome against really good teams when that does happen. And I just never felt like we truly overcame that. I thought we kind of did with the execution in the field goal right before the half. We kind of started 0-0 there to start the second half, and really it seemed like the third quarter and really most of the second half we were just playing. We were on our side of the field. We just never really had great field position, and that's something that we have done very well this year to this point is kind of playing that complementary ball where we're putting ourselves in good situations for field position and things like that. And it just felt like it was uphill today, and and that matters because it's hard to execute all the way down the field on offense against a really good defense, one that pressures you. And and then when we did, it just seemed like we'd maybe take a step back, whether it be a penalty or a sack or something to that effect. So that's it's the nature of this game. It's hard to run the table, and not to say that we didn't have that expectation, but. I still, there's still a lot out there for us. There's no doubt about that. But we've, like I said, we just got to look inward. We got to get up, look in the mirror, and say what can we do better, and that's what tomorrow's going to bring. And then we're going to flush it and move on, and kind of go from there. I
want to talk about this St. Thomas defense because this St. Thomas defense was legit. And we knew they were really good going into this game. It was something Coach Woodley talked about quite often. But the defensive line for St. Thomas was so physical and really made their presence felt pretty early on in this one. So you had Drake O-line issues, and that's something we're starting to see now. Drake allowed 3 sacks. Going into this game, or going into 2 weeks ago, Drake only allowed 8 total sacks all year. They've allowed now 7 sacks in the last 2 games. And Inagawa in the first half was on point, dealt with the pressure well. He went 6 of 6 for 93 yards, 48 rushing yards, and a touchdown. But in the second half, that pressure really got to him. And they also started changing up some of their looks defensively. You had blitzes from corners. You had blitzes coming from the middle of the field. So they were changing up a lot. And that's a credit to St. Thomas. But in the second half, he goes 8 of 16, only 61 yards, 1 interception, and sacked 3 times. But he was rushed every play. He had a player in front of him every play. That's why they couldn't get anything linear or downfield. Everything was just throws to the sidelines. Down the stretch, Drake could not complete a throw down the middle of the field, up the field. I mean, everything was towards the side. And so he finishes 14 of 22, 154 yards, 1 interception passing. Rushing stats got skewed because I don't like how in football, if you get sacked, they take that away from your rushing stats. I think that needs to change. But man, that defense was incredible for St. Thomas. Going from that to the positives, because I am a glass half full guy, and it's a gut punch to lose a game at home, in a game where you felt like you could have won that game. And that's where I'm starting is we just talked about all these negatives. We talked about penalties. We talked about miscues, how the offensive line underperformed and how well that St. Thomas defense overperformed. And yet, Drake got the ball with 3 minutes to go with a chance to win. They got the ball back with a little over a minute to go and still had a chance to win. Drake, even when they didn't play their best, still put themselves in a position to win the ball game. And that says something right there. That says something to really the theme of this team, something we have talked about day in and day out with Coach Woodley, his staff, his roster, is the resiliency. Very first clip, very first thing we talked about with this team against Upper Iowa was the way this team bounced back from mistakes. And then we talked about it, against South Dakota State, where you lose your quarterback. And now you have a true freshman, and you were still in that game for the most part. Drake was still in it, ball in hand, position to win, despite the mistakes. So you clear up a few things. You don't mishandle a snap. You don't turn over the ball. You don't throw it into triple coverage as Logan Inagawa did for his 1 interception. That's a rare mistake. That's him trying to make something out of nothing, and true freshman mistake. That felt like his first throw where you go, he looked like a freshman. He's human. And then, with everything we've said, Drake is still in the driver's seat for the PFL. Now it gets harder. You're not undefeated, but Drake still has a prime opportunity to make the FCS playoffs. And they got helped out from Presbyterian losing. But your top 3 standings in the PFL right now, it's still Drake number 1 at 5-1. St. Thomas now is at 5-2 at second place. And then tied for third, you have Dayton, who Drake plays next week on the road, and Presbyterian at 4-2. Everything being said, all the miscues, all the mistakes, Drake is still in the driver's seat. Drake is still, just like out on the field, putting themselves in a position to be successful. So a tough one as Drake falls 20-13 against St. Thomas. They fall to 6-3, 5-1 in the conference. They take on Dayton next weekend on the road, as you will be able to follow along at Media Row Pod on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. So hope you join us there. And of course, we'll have our discussion with Woodley on Wednesday to recap the loss and preview Dayton, as well as a full breakdown for Friday's show. All right. Now for the two local games. Man, great games overall for both the Iowa State Cyclones and the Iowa Hawkeyes. Two different outcomes, but as just a football fan in the state, games that won Iowa State, if you're a Cyclone fan, your team bounces back. You're very happy about that. And if you're a Hawkeye fan, man, that game lived up to the hype. And we're going to start there with Oregon escaping Iowa 18-16, winning on a field goal, basically with no time left on the clock. They were able to kick it off. They forced a fumble. But Oregon escapes Iowa City. Everyone was picking Iowa to upset the Ducks, and the Ducks prove a lot of people wrong. Quite simply, Oregon beat Iowa at their own game. Started the game off with a safety. That is vintage Iowa in a big game. They dominated the ground game, 261 yards rushing, 7.3 yards per carry. I have never seen a Hawkeye defense get destroyed on the ground game quite like that. 7.3 yards per carry is crazy. Iowa going into this game, their defense only allowed 83.9 yards per game. That was good enough for third in the Big Ten. The Ducks also won the turnover battle, 2-1. And lastly, Oregon won the game throwing for less yards than their opponent. Come on. That's what Iowa does best. They beat Iowa at their own game. And even with all that being said, even with Oregon winning, and with how much I do love Dan Lanning as a coach, I watched that game and I do not feel like Oregon is a legit title contender. They will probably make the college football playoff, but nothing right now is showing me that this team could make a run. Nothing is really impressing me. I like Dan Lanning. This team has some legit players. It definitely hurts Oregon when you lose your star tight end, your star wide receiver, your starting right tackle. That is all going to play a factor. Weather plays a factor, of course. But still, there was nothing that truly impressed me about Oregon where I watch that game and I go, Dan Lanning has himself a heck of a squad. It was more, man, Oregon needed every minute to win that one. But the way it was put out, I think the best way to describe this game is just Oregon beat Iowa at their own game. With the run game, the defense, the safety, which proved to be crucial. I'm just an absolute barn burner. And a game that lived up to the hype. I hustled out of Drake Stadium to get to watch this one. And they went on a game-winning field goal. And, you know, we've seen the videos from the 80s of when they beat Michigan on a field goal. They beat Michigan on a field goal in like 2016 or 17. I mean, it was just Oregon out Iowa. Quite simply. So Oregon escapes Iowa 18-16. Hawkeye fans, it was fun to talk about this team possibly making a run to the college football playoff, what they would need to do. They really needed to win out. So now to the point, it's just don't want to lose to Nebraska, win that rivalry game, and win a bowl game so that you can hopefully see your team with 10 wins. But really, same thing I talked about with Iowa State last week. At this point, you're just playing for pride. Because this day and age, I mean, there's not really any bowl games outside of the college football playoff that you win as a program and the fans go, yeah, look at that, we won. I mean, Iowa State last year winning the Pop-Tart Bowl against a really good Miami team, against Cam Ward, that was fun to cheer for, but I mean, overall, in 10 years, are people going to be like, oh man, remember that Pop-Tart Bowl? No. So both Iowa State now, you're just playing for pride. Just playing for pride. So Iowa loses 18-16. The Iowa State Cyclones, on the other hand, win 20-17 against TCU. And I have a bone to pick. One, congrats to Matt Campbell. Congrats to his squad for bouncing back. What the hell? For over a month now, I've been on Iowa State's side of, hey, this team's going to bounce back. Pulling stats out of, look at how good Matt Campbell is after losses. Look at what they've done. Rocco's going to figure it out. I finally pick against Iowa State in my Friday pick'ems. And I'm looking like I'm about to go 4-0 on the week, getting hyped. And you finally beat TCU. You improved to 6-4. You finally get your first win since September 27th. What the hell? I was on your side all the time. And then I finally jump off board. And then you decide to win. Thanks, Iowa State. Congrats. Congrats, though. It's better when Iowa State wins. It makes it more fun to talk about. It wasn't a beautiful game by any means. The defense really performed for Iowa State. The turnovers, that's what costed TCU the game right there. 3 total turnovers. They had 2 interceptions, a fumble. TCU, though, still had over 430 yards of total offense. So the defense wasn't perfect. They were 7 of 14 on third down. Dominated the time of possession. TCU 32 minutes, 36 seconds with the ball. Iowa State 27 minutes. But just a few things go Iowa State's way and become crucial. The turnover battle, the punt return by Flora, which was amazing. And it all distracts people from, again, how poorly Rocco played. Rocco, 9 of 24. 111 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. Bailed out by his running back and Hansen, 108 yards, a touchdown, just incredible. But something is not right offensively with Rocco, and we say that week in, week out. It was really cool, though, to see Ben Bramer haul in that touchdown. I mean, what an amazing story right there. That's better than Iowa State getting their first win since September. It was the Ben Bramer touchdown. That was really cool because that was a guy that collapsed on the field a week ago. Everyone's scared and no one knows what's going on. I mean, you hate to compare it, but I haven't seen anything like that since Hamlin, and that was terrifying. And what does he do? Comes out next week, puts up a touchdown. It was just a story, probably the story of the weekend, the feel-good story of the weekend in college sports overall. So Iowa State improves to 6-4. TCU falls to 6-3. Iowa State getting their first win in forever. And now they'll have Kansas on November 22nd. They get one more bye week, and then they finish up the year at home against Kansas and on the road against Oklahoma State. 2 very winnable games, but we always know Kansas likes to play Iowa State pretty close. And so we'll wrap up today's show, man, with just a really tough week to be a Bulldog fan. You had the Drake men lose on Thursday in their home opener. You had the football team lose their first conference game on Saturday at home. And then on Sunday at 4 o'clock, the Drake women, despite really coming back in the second half to make it a game, fall to a really talented Creighton Blue Jays team, 83-74. And it was just one of those games where it was a lot of fun, first off. It was a great game to watch if you're just a college basketball fan. But for the Drake Bulldogs, one of those games where they would cut it to 6 points, 4 points. Man, even cutting their lead down to 8 felt like a huge momentum change. But they cut this lead down to single digits against Creighton. And that Creighton offense that's so efficient and is definitely not afraid to put up threes. They shot on the day against Drake. They put up 30 three-pointers, making 12 of them for 40%. And they would hit them real quick. They would hit 2 threes right away coming down the floor, and it would force Drake to silence the crowd and lose all the momentum they were building. That is how this game just played out, where they would finally get something going, and Creighton would stop it. Drake falls in really tough fashion, 83-74. And before we break down too much more of this game, did get to speak with head coach Allison Pullman afterwards, and here are her opening thoughts following the tough loss at home in the season home opener against the Creighton Blue Jays. So let's start with negative. Let's go negative first, and that was mostly in the first half. First half, Drake just did not come out, like you heard Pullman say. That was indicative to Drake's style. They came out in a zone defense, and you could tell from this team there was communication errors, very similar to the men's team that we saw on Thursday. Just communication errors, not knowing where the offensive players are at, where you're moving on screens with two players moving towards one offensive player, leaving open shots. And against this Creighton team, one thing you can't do is give them open threes. They'll pop threes with a hand in their face and still make them. They're that strong of a deep threat from a team perspective, so you definitely can't have those miscommunications. So Drake goes down quickly by 11 points in that first half, at halftime down by 11. And you just had Creighton with all the momentum. They were getting the three ball to fall. Drake offensively, I thought in the first half, actually played well. They were getting the shots they wanted, just nothing was falling. And then you add on top the pressure of the opposing team really hitting anything they wanted. But the second half, Pullman makes the adjustments. They go to man-to-man. And this defense cranks it up a notch. You start seeing then Creighton fall into these 2-3 minute scoring droughts in the third quarter, while Drake, on the other hand, is starting to build momentum. And one of the biggest changes offensively for this team came off of the bench. Drake had great effort from Quinn Weiss, the freshman forward, standing at 6'4", who had some good work in the first game. And what was our biggest issue or concern with that season opening victory was, man, if you're open, take the shot. And Weiss bought into that. After a couple of days off for practice, she goes out there off of the bench, puts up 11 points, 4 of 12 shooting, 1 of 4 from deep, perfect at the free throw line, 5 rebounds, all in 20 minutes. And her effort, and just her with Ava Hawthorne and Grace Knutson, as well as Abby Alsma, Anna Becker, that lineup in the third quarter really changed the look of this game. It could have been way worse. It could have been uglier. And that lineup looked so well together. They were fluid with the ball. They were moving defensively. They were really, really strong offensively, especially with Weiss. And so just wanted to give credit to Quinn Weiss for the effort she put in. And as a freshman, really excited to see how she grows throughout this season. And then, of course, the two standouts quickly when you look at that box score. You see right away who the main go-to players were. Abby Alsma, who we've talked about time and time again on this show, someone who last season was good all year long, but man, towards that second half of the season, everybody started to click with all Bulldog fans that she is growing her confidence, and she is growing on both sides of the ball. She's going to be a leader for this team. And she puts up her second consecutive 20-plus point game, 23 points, 8 of 13 shooting, 5 of 8 from behind the arc. And then Grace Knutson was perfect to start the game offensively. She puts up 20 points. And her offensive game really was fun to watch with just the ball fakes, her ability to get to her spots, the post fades. Again, just some mid-range shots that you don't see this day and age. It was really fun to watch, and I'm really excited to see how she grows as well, because maybe Knutson can have that Abby Alsma effect where last year you didn't see her scoring 20 plus. And now she's starting to look really confident offensively and with the ball in her hand. So excited to see just how she grows. Excited to see how this whole team grows. This is a young team. Pullman talked about it in her press conference of there's a lot of learning experiences. This is a long season, very similar to the men's side where you just have this new roster that just has to learn how to play together. And a really tough game. Multiple times you felt like Drake could have taken over this game, just couldn't. And then to the flip side, Creighton could have easily won this game, made it an ugly loss for Drake where you have more concerns, and the resiliency from Pullman's group was really impressive as they outscored Creighton in the third quarter. So really fun. I love covering Drake women's basketball. They're so fun to watch. Easy team to cheer for with Pullman, her staff, and just all the players, the way they play. Just a really fun team to cheer on for, and they have a gauntlet. I mean an absolute gauntlet here coming up. So Thursday, of course, they hit the road to play the Iowa Hawkeyes, the 21st ranked team in the country. The Iowa Hawkeyes in Iowa City, 7:30. That is on Big Ten Network. And then it doesn't get much easier. They go and play the other in-state rival in the 14th ranked Iowa State Cyclones. That game is in the Knapp Center. But man, Audie Crooks has been unstoppable early. Both Iowa and Iowa State just cruised to their undefeated season so far to this point. Iowa put up over 100 points the other night. Iowa State continues to just feed Audie and everyone growing outside. But so then they have Iowa State, and Arkansas. Arkansas is undefeated at this point, and that's a road game in Tennessee in the Music City Classic. So doesn't get much easier for the Drake women, but we will be there day in, day out, covering the football team, the men and women's basketball team. So excited for this crossover part of our season. So thank you guys so much for tuning in once again to the show. Hope you enjoyed your sports weekend. Hopefully you enjoyed the show today, and tune in on Wednesday as we will have Coach Woodley for our Wednesday with Woodley. And then of course Friday for a breakdown of the women's game against Iowa. We'll preview and predict our football games as well as preview the Drake men's basketball game that we will be covering later that night. And of course, before I wrap up, need to give a huge thank you to Devin and Casey for allowing us to use their photos. All the Drake photos you see on this show are from Casey and Devin, and they have been awesome. I will include at the end of the show where you can follow them on social media to check out their great work. So just a huge thank you to Casey and Devin for allowing Media Row to look more professional with their photos. But that will do it for us today. We will see you on Wednesday for a brand new episode.